Hello, Space Unicorns! Welcome to the Uncanny Magazine Podcast, episode 67B. I am Michael Damian Thomas, the editor-in-chief and publisher of Uncanny Magazine. Recording this during Thanksgiving week here in America, which is it's one of those kind of bittersweet times again, in that this is usually the week that Caitlin would have Chicago TARDIS, which is amazing Doctor Who convention in Chicago, which I've went to Visions before that, and then Chicago TARDIS for a lot of years. I was even a guest a couple of times, back when the book Queer as Dick Time Lords I co-edited with Sigrid Ellis came out. But Caitlin spent a lot of time growing up at that convention and meeting the guests and just having a wonderful time. And in her last few years, when she was healthy enough, which she wasn't 1 year, and 1 year we're actually in the hospital in 2019, poor Kate. But she would go to Chicago TARDIS, meet the actors, have a grand old time, meet all of her friends, spend time with Stephen and Erika, the producers of this podcast. Many different people who loved her, and she had a wonderful time. In the last couple of years, there was an AEW wrestling show in Chicago that she also got to go to a couple of times. And that would be the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, and then have a Doctor Who weekend. So it was a magical thing for Caitlin. This is a week that I think about her a lot. She would love to be there right now. I'd love to be there with her. And next month, I am going to have an exciting adventure as I go to Scotland and spend Christmas with my family. And that's going to be pretty amazing. There is a lot going on, Space Unicorns, but I'm here and making this podcast for you. And now, the news. Fabulous news, Space Unicorns. Loneliness Universe by Evgenia Triantafilou won the Best Short Story 2025 British Fantasy Award. Congratulations to Evgenia and to all the finalists and winners. Well, Space Unicorns, it's that time of year when people post their year-end reviews to remind Science Fiction Fantasy Award voters what they might have missed and, especially for the Hugo Awards and Nebula Awards, in which categories those stories are eligible. Last year was the 11th full year of Uncanny Magazine, issues 62 through issue 67. We are extremely proud of the year we had. This year, Uncanny Magazine is still eligible for the Best Semi-Prosing Hugo Award. And this year, Michael Damian Thomas, that's me, is also eligible for the Best Editor Short-Form Hugo Award for editing issues 62 to 67 and content editing the It's Storytime with Will Wheaton podcast. Note, if you are nominating me in this category, please only list me. I solo edited Uncanny Magazine in 2025. So if you go to our website right now, Space Unicorns, you will see a list of all the stories Uncanny Magazine published, and it will tell you whether they're eligible in the short story, novelette, or novella categories of the SFF Awards. If you are a SIFA member nominating for the Nebula Awards, we hope to place ebooks of these stories in the SIFA forum, although it seems to be down at the moment, so I have been told that they actually are in the Discord, so you can find those complimentary ebooks there, SIFA members. Please note that essays are also eligible for the Best Related Work Hugo Award, and poetry is eligible for both the Riesling Award and the Nebula Award this year. As Uncanny is a semi-prosing, all the essays and original art also contributes towards the creator's Best Fan Writer and Best Fan Artist Hugo Award eligibility. So go check out this list on the Uncanny blog. And read widely, Space Unicorns, because there's so many amazing things everywhere. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Get ready for LACon 5, the 84th World Science Fiction Convention. Join fans, writers, and creators from around the galaxy for 5 days of panels, cosplay, and unforgettable fandom at the Anaheim Convention Center, August 27th to 31st, 2026. See you in the future.
And welcome back. This episode of the Uncanny Magazine podcast features the story The Teleporting Disaster Fairy by Rati Mehrotra, the poem My Duende in the Wall and in the Mirror by Angel Leal, and finally, I interview Rati Mehrotra. The Teleporting Disaster Fairy is just, Rati has written quite a few amazing stories for Uncanny Magazine over the last few years, and this is just such a wonderful story because it's an interesting, fascinating mix where it's just a little bit off the wall, but also very serious at the same time. It deals with a lot of different kind of hard things about the world while, kind of lacing a whimsy to it, kind of a dark whimsy. But it's just such a great story. Rati is just such a fabulous writer, and I think you all are going to very much enjoy this story. And now the story, The Teleporting Disaster Fairy, by Rati Mehrotra, as read by Matt Peters.
Content note: attempted suicide. The first time Kitsu teleported was into the lavatory of a plane bound for London, 15 seconds before it crashed in a field south of Gatwick. One moment, she was brushing her teeth in front of the bathroom mirror in her apartment in Toronto, wishing she had the money to go on vacation. And the next moment, she was thrown upward, hitting the ceiling of a tiny, smelly, enclosed space. Her mouth was screaming. So was her stomach. And so were other people, apparently. She vomited as the plane nosedived to its doom, her brain skittering around possible scenarios in its base hunt for survival. Nightmare? Hallucination? Time slip? Alien attack? The crash, when it came, was ear-splitting, soul-jarring. She fell on the toilet, groaning in pain, convinced she was dying, and in the most bewildering way, too. After some confusion, she decided she wasn't dying, although her body felt like it had been pummeled by a giant. There were voices outside, shouts and thuds, and the sound of running footsteps. She hauled herself up and wrestled with the door, but it was jammed. She banged on it, calling for help. It was a long time before help came. Kitsu tried to breathe and meditate and ignore the complaints of her body. Nothing was permanent. The body was a shell. There was no undying self. All was unity, and all was also plurality. And if she could walk the middle path between those two extremes, what was so unnerving about her present situation? At last, the door was wrenched open by rescuers. Kitsu was taken to a hospital with the other survivors, 32 in all, out of a total of 84 on board. All who survived had been seated near the lavatory, near her. The rear cabin of the plane was the only part that stayed intact after the crash. A miracle, people called it. It was a while before they discovered the second miracle, namely Kitsu. She had been rescued from a plane lavatory, so she was clearly a passenger. But she wasn't on the passenger manifest. In fact, there was no record of her leaving Toronto at all, and the flight had originated in Zurich. At first, airline staff thought she was lying or confused about her identity. But her identity was confirmed through a combination of biometrics and dental x-rays. She was interviewed on her hospital bed by a series of hatchet-faced men and women, to all of whom she gave the same honest answers. No, she didn't know how she got on the plane. No, she was not a terrorist, nor did she support any terrorist ideology. No, she hadn't left Toronto in over a decade. She couldn't afford to fly anywhere. Her only trip abroad in all her 25 years had been over the border to the American side of Niagara Falls, back when she was in college. Yes, she dropped out. Yes, she worked as a cashier in a grocery store in downtown Toronto. Pizza? No thanks. She was vegan. Not quite a Buddhist, but she had those leanings. Family? None. Never had Kitsu been so keenly aware of her brown skin, her ethnic looks, the indeterminacy of her name. Kitsu Warrior. It sounded so martial, so unlike her, and so unlike the stoic, hardworking immigrant parents who had died when a car crashed into their diner. Talking about them hurt. Still, she answered her interrogator's questions, and at the end of each session, plucked up the courage to ask one of her own. Could she possibly leave the hospital and see a bit of London? No, she could not. They seemed affronted that she would even ask. They kept her for another week, during which scientists were called in to conduct various tests on her, placing electrodes on her scalp to measure her brain waves and a helmet to detect magnetic fields. She was subject to an MRI, a CT scan, and a full-body ultrasound, as if she might harbor sneaky alien tissue under her skin. At the end of it, she was deported back to Canada without ever having left the hospital, which she thought mean. It wouldn't have hurt them to let her tour London, would it? After all she had been through? Her injuries may have been minor, but what about the mental trauma of displacement? They ought to have given her compensation instead of treating her like a criminal. When she landed in Toronto, she was met with the flash of cameras and an excited gaggle of reporters. Despite the hatchet-faced people's best efforts, her story had leaked to the press. Kitu had never received so much attention in her life. It was disconcerting, but she made the best of it. She was paid $10,000 to appear for an interview by the CBC, something they assured her they rarely did. On the panel with her were a representative from the Canadian Paranormal Society, a researcher on quantum teleportation, and a priest. After a heated discussion, the anchor dubbed her the teleporting woman and surmised that her inexplicable appearance was responsible for the miraculous survival of the passengers in the rear cabin of the plane. The next day, the hate began. There were plenty of people who disagreed with the anchor and thought Kitu was responsible for the crash. She broke the laws of physics, screamed the headline of a local rag. Now the laws of physics will break her. The writer was quite pleased with himself over that article. It referenced her veganism, her Buddhist leanings, her lack of friends and family, and hinted darkly of otherworldly forces in Eastern religions. Trolls found out where she worked. Kitu quit her job when someone came asking for an autograph and threw dog feces at her instead. $10,000 didn't go far in Toronto, so she accepted another interview, with Fox News this time. She had some misgivings about it, but they offered $10,000 US. The exchange rates being what they are, this meant over $13,000 in Canadian currency. It was too good to pass up. It was better than being a test subject for the weapons companies that had reached out to her at any rate. Kitu had had enough of being tested, and she had no desire to contribute to the global arms industry. The Fox News anchor was less kind than the CBC anchor. He accused Kitu of being part of a government conspiracy to distract the public and hide the true cause of the crash. Kitu's denial sounded weak to her own ears. A conspiracy was more plausible than the truth, after all. If she was a viewer, she wouldn't have believed herself either. After the Fox News interview, Kitu decided to lay low for a while. She holed up in her room, refuting the conspiracy theories about her online, fending off shady corporate inquiries, and researching possible causes for what had happened. There was no sensible way to explain it, but there was no sensible way to explain the universe either. Why is existence was a bigger and more unanswerable question than why did I teleport into the lavatory of a falling plane? Was her physical displacement a mere extension of the mental and spiritual displacements she experienced after her parents' death? Kitu had never been an extrovert, but while her parents were around, she was part of a community, working at the diner after school, delivering food to customers, volunteering at the community kitchen, accompanying her parents to the local temple. These were not things she would have admitted to doing of her own free will. Yet, when they were gone, they left giant holes of nothing. Her life was a lacuna, defined by absence. Until the plane. Clearly, the universe was trying to tell her something. All she had to do was listen and understand. She only went out for groceries, fully masked, and avoided her neighbors. Happily, everyone else in her multiplex, a rambling old house converted into 6 studio apartments, had too many issues of their own to pay attention to hers. Apartment A was an alcoholic. B was a retired paramedic with PTSD. C had fled an abusive marriage. D was a penniless violinist who was currently wooing C. E had dissociative identity disorder with 3 distinct personalities, one of whom claimed telekinetic powers. F was Kitu. She fit right in. The rent was low, and she could have lived there for several years, with her neighbors none the wiser. Unfortunately, the second time she teleported was while walking down the stairs to the front door right in front of C and D, who had been about to kiss for the first time and thus were staring at her with a mixture of annoyance and embarrassment. Kitu arrived on the deck of a massive cruise ship in the middle of the sea. After the first few disorienting moments, she removed her mask and cast a covert glance around. People lounged on deck chairs in scanty swimwear, sunbathing. Waiters circulated with trays of colorful fruity drinks. A group of kids was playing with inflatables in a small swimming pool. No one seemed to have noticed her pop into existence. Kitu let out the breath she had been holding. The sun shone bright. The pale blue sky was dotted with cottony clouds, and the sea was a startling turquoise she had only seen in pictures before. Now this was a vacation. She grabbed a drink from a passing waiter, leaned on the railing and sipped, enjoying herself and trying to forget how she had, once again, broken the laws of physics. Kitu had just finished a drink, a delicious mix of pineapple juice, coconut water, and cranberry juice, when there was a whoosh followed by a terrific bang in the rear of the ship. A missile? Kitu's heart sank as fire bloomed into the sky and the ship erupted into screams. Was she destined to always teleport into disaster? Could she not have teleported to a white sandy beach or a coral island? Of course, if that happened, it would probably be just before a tsunami hit. As she boarded a lifeboat along with 100 panicky passengers, she contemplated selling herself as a warning system. All people had to do was evacuate as soon as she appeared, or gather around her, to dramatically improve their odds of survival. Maybe this was what the universe intended for her. She put forward her theory to the captain of the rescue ship, which arrived 5 hours later. Hours filled with sobs and shrieks and much vomiting over the side of the boat on the part of her fellow passengers. The captain put her babbling down to PTSD and ordered her to be restrained until they docked in Corfu. He had over 1,500 survivors to deal with, all in various states of injury and distress, and had no time for the ravings of any one of them. It took much longer for Kitu's identity to be confirmed this time, even though she was carrying her wallet, things being more chaotic in Greece than they had been in the UK. On the plus side, she got to spend a few days in sunny Corfu before she was transported to the Canadian embassy in Athens. On the minus side, those days were spent in a holding facility. Why were people so stingy about their scenic spots? Would it reduce their touristy charm if she laid eyes on their churches, their beaches, their cliffs, their ruins, their waterfront taverns? Was she not worthy simply because she did not have a passport? In Athens, she explained what had happened to embassy staff, to universal disbelief. Disbelief changed to disapproval when she pulled up her CBC interview on one of their terminals and told them who she was. This time, there were not only dental records and biometrics to prove her identity, but her health card, her credit card, and the near hysterical accounts of C and D, who had witnessed her vanish before their eyes. That story had already broken days ago, with news anchors discussing where she might have ended up. When her location and the link with the cruise ship disaster was revealed, media outlets exploded. Kitu was a PSYOPs agent. Kitu was an alien. Kitu was a messiah. Kitu was a demonic manifestation of all the evil in the world. Her return to Toronto this time was fraught. The reporters waiting in the arrival area were more aggressive, the crowds frenzied. Airport security helped her into a prepaid taxi and washed their hands of her, but the scene at home was no better. Kitu took one look at the crowds milling before her multiplex and begged the driver to take her to the nearest Timmy's instead. At Timmy's, she donned a surgical mask she picked up at the airport and spent $5 of the $20 embassy staff had given her on a cup of boiling hot steeped tea and a chocolate donut. She sat at a corner table, nibbling the donut beneath her mask, trying to cultivate detachment. The donut was sweet, but it would finish soon. The tea was hot, but it would cool down. She was as changeable, as temporary as them. Why then should she hurt so much? The theory was correct, but the practice was hard. She was a flawed human, not a bodhisattva. She managed not to cry. She managed to persuade herself that this too would pass. When Timmy's closed at midnight, she snuck back home and was relieved to find the reporters gone. E let her in. It was the personality that claimed telekinetic powers, which made it easier. C&D had inadvertently revealed her location, so there was no help for it but to move. But where to? Kitu was unemployed and now unemployable. Her savings were low, and the wait list for subsidized housing was several years long. Just when she thought she would have to pitch a tent in the local park, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service came to her rescue. Someone had belatedly decided she was a person of interest. Kitu was taken to Ottawa, lodged in a budget hotel, and interrogated over the next few days by various CSIS agents. This was a vacation of sorts. The room and board were decent, and she didn't have to do anything except answer the same questions repeatedly. The best part? No reporters of any kind. She could walk along the river, climb Parliament Hill, or wander around the farmer's market unmolested. To be on the safe side, she carried her passport everywhere, even slipping it into her pajama pocket at night. She mastered the art of the 30-second shower, lowering the risk of teleporting while nude. She washed her hair fully clothed, head bent over the bathroom sink. And that was how, the third time she teleported, it was with a head full of shampoo and a damp shirt, to the lip of a level 2 volcano near Iwo Jima. Kitu had taken a moment to congratulate herself on her foresight, another to admire the view, and a couple more to take in the signage and the stunned tour group. The sky was clear, the sun was shining, and the sea in the distance was an unruffled blue. There was only one possible disaster that could happen here. "Run!" she bellowed. The volcano was about to erupt. She turned and ran, trusting in the sheep-like nature of humans. If one cried wolf, the rest were sure to follow. Sure enough, the panicked tourists ran after her, several overtaking her down the hill and toward the docks, where they leaped on the boats and shouted for evacuation. Despite some confusion and delay on the part of the tour operators, the boats managed to pull away before the volcano erupted, launching ash and rock 2 miles into the air. Kitu coughed, her eyes watering as the boats attempted to outrace the toxic ash cloud. This time, there were no fatalities, only minor burns. Kitu regarded the survivors with a benign air, in much the way a mother hen might regard her chicks after chasing a fox away. She had found her calling, and she was in Japan, with her passport. She even had a $20 bill. True, it wouldn't go very far, but surely it was enough for a couple of snacks and a few turns at those famous claw machines. Tokyo, here I come, she thought gleefully. Alas, it was not to be. The Japanese erred on the side of caution and deported her as soon as they confirmed her identity. They were polite and implacable. After all, it was unclear whether disasters caused her to appear or if she caused disasters to appear. Once was a mistake, twice was cosmic coincidence, 3 times made it a rule. Teleporting disaster fairy strikes again, screamed the headlines the next day, which Kitu thought misleading. She hadn't struck anyone, she'd saved them. Could she have saved her parents? This question did not pop into her mind all at once. It slid in like a snake and, once lodged, refused to leave, breeding chatty offspring. If she had been in the diner with them at the time, could the car crash have been avoided? If they were still alive, would she have continued being a disappointment to them? Would she still have dropped out of college? Would they still have fought like cats and dogs? Would her mother still be making coconut fish curry and appam every Saturday night? Would Kitu still be teleporting into disasters, or was the car crash the beginning and end of it all? Grief due to loss and impermanence was one of the 3 categories of suffering. Knowing this did not decrease Kitu's suffering. She was trapped on a wheel, unable to get off, unable to understand what the universe was telling her, or if it was telling her anything at all. Save everyone, maybe. Save everyone and you get 1 wish, that would be nice. If only it were true. The 4th time she teleported was into a concert hall in Berlin, 15 minutes before a planned terrorist attack, which failed because she marched onto the stage, grabbed the mic from a bewildered singer, and ordered everyone to evacuate in an orderly way. Not that she knew what was going to happen, but it was sure to be terrible, going by experience. By the time security nabbed her, people were already rushing out. The gun-toting terrorists who were trying to get in were trampled in the stampede. After this, CSIS agents kept her in a holding cell in the vain hope that reinforced concrete walls would prevent her from causing international incidents. They didn't. A week later, Kitu teleported into a school in California just before a mass shooting. She hurried to the principal's office and told him she'd overheard a student making a bomb threat. While factually incorrect, it did have the result of having the school evacuated. The would-be shooter was arrested outside the school and charged with possession of illegal firearms. Unlike everyone else, the Americans tried to detain Kitu. She spent a miserable month in an ice jail before teleporting to a Nepalese mountain village, where her arrival in the middle of a meeting caused considerable excitement and alarm. The elders deduced that conditions were ripe for an avalanche and led everyone down the mountain minutes before the village was buried in snow. The trickiest part was always predicting what sort of disaster would occur and how to get everyone out as quickly as possible. Fortunately, English was a global language, so Kitu didn't have to worry about being understood in most countries. She spent her time back in her holding cell in Ottawa reading up on disaster management, which was more useful than wallowing in existential angst. or trying to find a pattern to her jumps. Why didn't she teleport to every major disaster? She scanned the news every day and made copious notes, but couldn't figure out if there was a method to the madness or if it was utterly random. CSIS agents gave her the books and newspapers she wanted and let her go for walks, having given up on the idea that they were confining her in any useful way. The second last time Kitu teleported was into a Russian naval submarine. To her astonishment, no one recognized her or understood her. That was a first. She was arrested as a stowaway by the officer on duty and confined to the brig. She tried to stay calm. She tried to prepare herself for death. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened next, which was exactly nothing. The submarine surfaced after a few days, and she was sent to a Moscow jail for foreigners. It took 6 months for the Canadian embassy to negotiate her release, months that the Russians spent fruitlessly watching her for paranormal tendencies. Kitu practiced yoga and breath control and waited, in vain, to teleport out of jail. Finally, with much disappointment, she was deported back home. Why did nothing happen on the submarine? Had her presence rendered an impending disaster invalid? A submarine explosion, for instance, had a vanishingly low survival rate, so this was not implausible. More importantly, why had she not teleported out of the Russian jail? Had she broken some sort of rule? Perhaps she would start teleporting again once she was back home. Kitu returned to her holding cell filled with anticipation, but several months passed and nothing continued to happen. Kitu slipped out of the news and out of the minds of her CSIS handlers. She was an anomaly, best forgotten for the sake of general sanity. One evening, her cell door was left open and she walked out. No one tried to stop her. Kitu kept walking. Somewhere in her experience were clues to the secrets of the universe, but all she wanted was a clue to her own existence. Life bred desire, and desire bred suffering. But had she not saved enough people by now to earn the merit of a single wish? If not, she might as well walk into Ottawa River. "You know how to swim," said a small pesky voice in her brain. She brushed it aside. So what? Perhaps the drama of a small individual disaster would break the deadlock. It wasn't as if she had enjoyed teleporting, but averting disasters had given meaning to her life. She wouldn't let it be taken away without a single act of defiance. She arrived at the beach and took off her shoes, shivering in the autumnal cool. This late, the beach was deserted, the river mirroring the dark gray sky. She walked toward the water's edge, wincing as pebbles dug into her feet, and stepped in. The water was cold and heavy, soaking into her jeans. A small current grabbed her legs, making her stumble, but she kept going. Higher the water rose, and higher still, but she didn't stop, not even when it reached her shoulders. Space had bent around her to save other people. She had to trust it would bend to save her. The water rose above her mouth, her nose, her head. Dark, it was so dark inside the water, and so very cold. The last breath escaped her lips. Am I not worth it? She thought. Her eyes and lungs burned. Her mouth opened of its own accord to take in air that wasn't there, and the river vanished, replaced by a small, crowded diner. The aroma of rice and coconut curry assailed her nostrils. From a beat-up pair of speakers, an old Bollywood number struggled to be heard above the noisy customers. "Kitu!" shouted her mother, sliding a tray on the counter. "Table 4! Kitu swayed and blinked. Her mouth worked, but no words came out. "I'll take it." Her father grabbed the tray. "Kitu, clean table 3. Kitu obeyed, her legs moving like an automaton. "Ma, Pa, you're alive." She should be asking what date it is. She should be evacuating the diner. She should be... There was a tremendous crash outside. After a moment of stunned silence, they all rushed out. Kitu followed her parents, her heart beating like a drum. A red Honda Civic had crashed into a utility pole. The same car that had, in a different timeline, crashed into her parents' diner, setting it ablaze. A police car arrived, followed by an ambulance. "That could have been much worse," muttered her father. He turned to her. "What are you gawking for? There's work to be done." The world fell into peace. Kitu went back in, her heartbeat steadying. She put aside, for now, the burning questions of whether she was dead or alive, asleep or awake, singular or duplicate. As Pa said, there was work to be done.
Born and raised in India, Rati Mehrotra now lives and writes in Toronto, Canada. She is the author of the science fantasy novels Markswoman and Mahimata, published by Harper Voyager, and the YA fantasy novels Night of the Raven, Dawn of the Dove, and Flower and Thorn, published by Wednesday Books. Her short fiction has been shortlisted for the Sunburst Award, nominated for the Aurora Award, and has appeared in multiple venues including the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, Clark's World, Lightspeed Magazine, Uncanny Magazine, Apex Magazine, Podcastle, and Cast of Wonders. And now our poem, My Duende in the Wall and in the Mirror, by Angel Leal, as read by Erika Ensign.
I was smaller than a candle. I had no bold fire to scare away the little man whose mouth was made of shadow, whose old body lived behind my bedroom wall. My duende made sure I was clean. Like an obsessed mother, he used to reach out of the wall and cut my toenails, watch my dreams swirl behind my young hair. And if my mind dreamed of lights too incomprehensible to my duende, he would scoop my dream in his little hands, toss it in the dark of his mouth. That was the spring of my life, when strawberries are meant to paint our thumbs, when the warm sun is our only god. But I stayed inside with my duende and let him eat my childhood. Now, my duende lives in the mirror. He is the first eye to see me change, to see the woman I'm shaping with trembling hands. I, who gave the duende my boyhood as if it were an apple to share, refuse to give womanhood as easily. I scream when I see his mouth. I take a break from mirrors, and my partner cradles my head. Their fingers are as soft as raindrops when they graze my chin hair. They don't think I'm less of a woman at such small hours. In the morning, I'll find his mouth again, my old duende, and I'll need to somehow remember that my face does not belong to the mirror. Not even a duende can keep it. When I step away, it is mine again. She was always mine.
Angel Leal is a Latin trans ace writer who has several witches in the family. They are a 2025 Clarion West Fellow, a poetry editor for Other Side, and their previous work appears in Uncanny, Strange Horizons, The Deadlands, and We're Here, the Best Queer Speculative Fiction of 2024, published by Neon Hemlock Press. They've been nominated for the Pushcart Prize, the Riesling, Best of the Net, the Utopia Award, and Best New Poets. Thank you for joining us on the Uncanny Magazine podcast. Today I am joined by Rati Mehrotra, the author of this month's podcast short story, The Teleporting Disaster. Welcome, Rati.
Thank you, Michael.
This is such a fascinating story that contains just a lovely balance, like most of your stories do, of darkness, but also humor, maybe a touch of whimsy. What was your starting point or inspiration for this story?
My starting point for the story was actually a question posed by the protagonist within the story. Why is existence? And as she points out, that is the biggest and most unanswerable question of all. No matter what absurdity the universe throws at you, nothing beats the absurdity and mystery of that original question. So I thought of the most absurd things that could happen to a person and built a character who could sort of take that strangeness in her stride because of her philosophy, and I built a story around that premise.
What was the easiest part of writing this story, and what was the most challenging thing about it?
The easiest part of writing the stories was the disasters. Unfortunately, we live in a world where disasters are all too common, both natural and caused by humans. You don't have to look further than a newspaper for inspiration, sadly, so the disasters kind of wrote themselves. On the other hand, the most challenging part for me in writing the story was reaching the ending. I knew what I wanted for the character. I knew the emotional payoff I wanted. I just wasn't sure how to get there. And as is quite common with my work, I had to go through a few iterations to get to a point where I felt it was right.
It does. I mean, it's very satisfactory. There's kind of it kind of puts a warm hug on the whole story, just kind of almost a relief.
That's what I was looking for, really.
In the story, Quito often teleports to places where she would love to stay for a while. Assuming it would not be connected to a disaster, is there some place you would love to teleport to for a holiday?
I would love to go back to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Ooh.
This is a union territory of India.
Mm-hmm.
It's a collection of almost 500 islands, most of which are uninhabited, between the Bay of Bengal and the Andaman Sea. And I went there as a child. They're simply gorgeous. And I went again as an adult. And now, coincidentally, the second time I went was not long after the 2004 tsunami.
Oh, yes.
Which was a major disaster for the region. I was working for the World Conservation Union at that time, and it was my project to study the impact of the disaster on the islands and the people, the economy, the biodiversity. And I would love to go back now and see how they've recovered and how the biodiversity is flourishing now.
And what has changed and adapted.
Yeah. And for a holiday, because it's just gorgeous.
So tell us something you've read, watched, or consumed lately that you'd love to share with our listeners.
I'm currently rereading a really fascinating book called Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio. It's a collection of nearly 500 supernatural stories assembled by the writer Su Ping Long over a period of nearly 40 years back in the 17th century. And some of the stories are really short, some are longer. Terrible, absurd things happen to the characters. There's very little reason, logic, justification, or moral to the stories, but they're wildly entertaining and very different from what you might consider classic Western ghost stories.
Right.
And I highly recommend it, especially if you like to read stories from different parts of the world.
Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope everybody continues to check out all the stories you've written online and everywhere else, and also your novels.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Space Unicorns, for listening to another episode of the Uncanny Magazine podcast. As always, we couldn't do it without your support. Whether you are a patron on Patreon, a Kickstarter backer, a subscriber at Waitlist Books, or just go around spreading the good word about Uncanny Magazine and its podcast. But as always, Uncanny couldn't do it without the best staff in the entire universe. And that includes managing editor Monty Lin, poetry editor Betsy Aoki, podcast producers Erika Ensign and Stephen Shapansky, podcast readers Matt Peters and Erika Ensign, interviewer Carolyn M. Yoakum, assistant editor Tanya Chen, and all the submission editors who just finished getting through 2,800 submissions. So thank you so much to this wonderful, amazing staff. To all of you out there, shine on, Space Unicorns. Nay!
The Uncanny Magazine podcast theme is courtesy Null Device. Want to join the Space Unicorn Ranger Corps? You can find poetry, stories, and nonfiction every month in Uncanny Magazine. Go to uncannymagazine.com or subscribe to the ebook version at waitlistbooks.com. Uncanny Magazine podcast, copyright Uncanny Magazine.